In the realm of human existence, there lies a parallel universe, hidden behind thick walls and barbed wire. Welcome to the world's toughest prisons, where the boundaries between humanity and brutality blur. Number 8. Stanley Prison, Hong Kong. Stanley Prison in Hong Kong is the oldest still in existence, having been built in 1937. Now usually that's not a glowing review of a prison's living conditions, right? This massive complex is pretty much surrounded by water, making escape attempts close to impossible. It's no walk in the park inside either. Stanley is a high-security penitentiary that houses some of the most dangerous and infamous criminals in Hong Kong. We're talking rapists, murderers, gang members, and drug dealers. You name it, they've had them. Now, while it's relatively strict, you won't hear the same horror stories you might find in some other notorious prisons. Sure, there are occasional scuffles, and every now and then rival gangs might go at it. But for the most part, it's your typical maximum security setup. Definitely not a place you'd want to call home. That's for sure. Number 7. Butyrka Prison, Russia. Butyrka Prison, officially known as Butyrskaya Prison, is a notorious detention facility located in the Tverskoy district of central Moscow, Russia. It has a long history dating back to the 18th century and has been associated with harsh living conditions and notable inmates. The conditions here are harsh, to say the least, and human rights violations are unfortunately par for the course. One of the big issues is overcrowding. I mean, we're talking about squeezing 100 prisoners into cells meant for just 10. That's beyond cramped. To make matters worse, drugs and diseases run rampant inside. It's such a problem that the prisons had to get creative with cell assignments. They're grouping inmates based on their specific diseases. HIV-positive folks go in one, tuberculosis in another. Needles get passed around, and so does the sickness. It's a pretty grim picture, to be honest. But hey, they'll proudly tell you they at least have TVs. So, you know, silver linings and all that. Number 6. Kendu Penitentiary. You know, there's this ongoing competition among prisons worldwide to earn the title of the worst. And here's another contender, the Kendu Penitentiary in Brazil. This place had quite a history. It was actually built back in 1890 following the introduction of a new criminal code in Brazil's legal system. But as the decades rolled on, things went seriously downhill. Kendu became insanely overcrowded to the point where it was just unmanageable. Imagine this, at its peak, it crammed 8,000 prisoners with only 1,000 prison officers. And guess who was calling the shots? Yep, the inmates themselves. Gangs pretty much ruled the entire place. Disease and injury were rampant, and there was hardly any medical care to speak of. Most inmates were malnourished and dealing with HIV and various other nasty diseases. The medical staff? Well, they were too terrified to step foot inside because of the violence and danger lurking in there. So, the inmates suffered and died without proper care. Then, in 1992, a massive riot erupted, and the prison couldn't handle the chaos anymore. They called in the military police, but things went horribly wrong. During the operation, 111 prisoners lost their lives, and many of them were executed after they had surrendered. This sparked a massive scandal that eventually led to the closure and demolition of the prison in 2002. Number 5. La Santé Prison, France. La Santé Prison in France has quite a reputation, and not the good kind. This place is known for its VIP sections and high security areas, and it's smack dab in the center of Paris. Talk about a prime location, right? Believe it or not, there's been a prison on this very spot for centuries. And like many old prisons, it's had its fair share of ups and downs when it comes to conditions. It's even made its way into stories, most famously in Maurice Leblanc's Arsène Lupin tales. Now, if you're a famous figure in France and you end up behind bars, chances are you'll find yourself in the VIP wing of La Santé. They like to keep the big shots separate from the regular one, you know. But La Sante isn't just known for its VIP treatment. It used to be the place where they carried out executions right in the prison yard. The last one was a good old guillotine job in 1972. After that, the death penalty got the boot, and no more heads rolled in the streets of Paris. The prison went on, and conditions seemed to go from bad to worse until 2000, when the head doctor there had enough. They blew the whistle on the terrible conditions, and the government finally stepped in. The whole place got shut down for a facelift in 2014. Number 4. Sullivan County Jail, New York. It's a maximum security prison, and it's run by the New York State Department of Correctional Services. Inside, you've got around 560 to 580 inmates, and they're kept in what they call pods arranged in a circle. Now, here's the kicker. A lot of these inmates are doing life sentences, and a whopping 86% of them are in for violent crimes. Now, what makes this place extra notorious is that it's home to none other than David Berkowitz, the infamous son of Sam Killer who terrorized New York back in the late 1970s. And he's not the only unpleasant character there. You've got a bunch of other folks serving multiple life sentences without any chance of parole. It's definitely not the kind of place you'd want to visit voluntarily. Number 3. Terre Haute USA. Terre Haute Prison, also known as the United States Penitentiary, located in Terre Haute, Indiana. This place has been around since 1940, and it's not your run-of-the-mill prison. It's a high-security federal correctional facility run by the Federal Bureau of Prisons. It's also one of the very few places in the United States authorized to carry out federal executions. In recent years, it's made quite a name for itself due to the resumption of federal executions after a long break. Some high-profile executions, like Timothy McVeigh, the guy behind the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, and Daniel Lewis Lee, a white supremacist convicted of murder, have happened right there. It's a place that's seen its fair share of notoriety, that's for sure. Number 2. Pelican Bay State Prison, California. In the picturesque California town of Crescent City is Pelican Bay State Prison. This location has been around since 1989, making it as secure as Fort Knox. It's got quite the reputation for hosting some of the Golden State's most infamous and downright dangerous residents. Now, Pelican Bay is more than just cell blocks. It's got a few unique sections. There's the security housing unit, where the so-called troublemakers reside, and then there's the administrative segregation unit for those who've broken the rules in spectacular fashion. The security housing unit, or SU, once stirred quite the pot with its assignment policy. This policy was all about keeping inmates with alleged gang ties in check, but it got its fair share of flack for keeping them in solitary for way too long. Lately, they say they've tweaked it to give these folks more chances to socialize and turn their lives around. But Pelican Bay isn't all about tough love. They've got an impressive lineup of rehab programs on offer. Think education, vocational training, kicking addiction, and taking care of mental health. The goal: help inmates address the root causes of their troubles and gear up for a successful comeback to the real world. Now, despite being known as the Alcatraz of the West Coast, Pelican Bay has faced its fair share of legal battles over how they treat their inmates and the overall conditions. They've made some changes to improve the place and how folks are treated, but whether they've really struck that elusive balance between safety and humanity, well, that's a debate that's still raging on. Number 1, Camp 22, North Korea. Now, we all know North Korea is about as secretive as a cat with a hidden stash of treats, but it's not a mystery that they've got some serious human rights problems brewing in there. When you're closed off from the rest of the world, it's like you're in a no-rule zone, and North Korea isn't shy about throwing its weight around. North Korea is said to have a whole network of prison camps, and we're talking up to 200,000 unlucky souls trapped in there. These places are no summer camps. They're more like concentration camps, and they're definitely not playing nice with international human rights laws. But since North Korea's not exactly throwing the doors open for a United Nations inspection, these conditions just keep on keeping on. Now, the intel we've got on these camps is scarce, but the stories from survivors are hair-raising. Picture this: about a quarter of the inmates bite the dust every year. They're barely fed, just surviving on a diet of cornmeal and cabbage, if you can even call it that. So, a lot of them end up chowing down on rats and insects just to stay alive. And that's just the beginning. Inmates are worked like machines in all kinds of brutal weather, and many of them have lost fingers and toes to frostbite. Fear, torture, and terror are all part of the daily menu, and trying to escape, well, that's a one-way ticket to an execution. Now, North Korea does its best magician act by denying these camps even exist, but satellite images say otherwise, and it looks like they're growing, not shrinking. Which prison is the ultimate nightmare for you? Leave your answer in the comment section below, and while you're at it, take a peek at the exciting stuff on the screen.